All right, folks, welcome aboard. Once again, it's time for the Mac Forum weekly video chat for March 15th, 2015. I'm your host, Sly Dude on the forum. Glad to have you this week. I hope that you enjoy the info that we have coming. It should be kind of interesting, although it will be a little short tonight, maybe a little bit shorter than usual. We'll have our usual rundown of information, a couple of quick tips, and the forum overview, basically. And then probably just a comment or two about the keynote for this week's, from this week's recent Mac Spring video event. Excuse me, I got a little tongue-tied there. This is going to be, hopefully you'll find some of the comments interesting. It's something that, as usual, there's always some good commentary. We'll have some links in the show with a few tips, as well as some commentary regarding, there are a couple forum threads devoted to the keynote event and the subsequent aftermath. I'll put a link to those in the show notes, so you'll be able to have a look and see what some of our members are saying about this event. I do want to point out to you that currently, as our threads, as of roughly a half hour ago, as of about 6:30, we had a total of 285,266 threads, which consisted of 1,567,181 posts, and that was those posts were contributed by a total of 294,075 members, so just under 295,000 members. Our newest member, I'm going to spell this one because I'll never get it pronounced correctly, GJECMFGU. So welcome to them and to all of our new members this week. I hope that you enjoy your time in Mac Forums and go ahead and ask any questions that you might want to ask. We have a host of very knowledgeable people that are more than happy to answer any questions. Do pay attention, though, when you're, you can help us tremendously when you're starting to write your post. If you will go ahead and provide the basics about your machine, about the machine that you're asking about. So, you know, your machine specs, your operating system, your hardware that's involved, any troubleshooting steps that you have taken already. Those will help us tremendously. That way we don't have to ask you. Sometimes I notice that when the thread gets going, the first several posts are devoted to trying to gather up that basic information. I realize that sometimes we have some new members who maybe are new to the Mac, don't know where you can find that information. If you'll post even that much, then we know how to tell you where to go to get to it. As a general rule, it varies slightly, the specific steps that you will take to get a full overview of your system. But as a general rule, what you're going to want to do for that, just as a free bit of information this evening, go to the Apple menu in the upper left corner of the screen, choose About This Mac, and depending upon which OS version you have, you will get any one of a couple of different screens. The screen will look slightly different. On Yosemite, it's a tab screen where you can look at things section by section. But if you, even in the older versions of the OS, if you click on System Report, and on some it was called System Profiler, it will give you a more detailed overview. The very first screen, even without clicking on System Profiler or System Report, will show you basics such as your MAC type, the processor, the amount of memory that's involved, and what version of the OS is installed. That's the basics of what you would need in order to answer our troubleshooting queries. So that gets you started in the right direction. And as I say, if you have some question about what information to include, feel free to ask away in the forum, and we'll be glad to help you. Several members have at the bottom of their signature a sticky thread that explains how to write a quality post in terms of if you're asking for help, what information needs to be in that post. So lots of helpful things there. We've finally gotten the Sunday Forum chat thread into a sticky, so you can look there. It's in the news and community announcements section. Each week, we'll try to post that several hours before the show with the link, or you'll also find announcements there in terms of if a show has to be canceled for some reason. So having said those basics and gotten those things out of the way, let's get started with some of the information that we have this week. One of the things that came into being with iOS 8, that was brought into play with iOS 8, is the ability to have emergency contact information. This has become a big issue for some people because as we carry more and more of our life digitally, many people now are not carrying around some of the hard copy of information that they did. You know, I have not carried a paper address book or contact book with me in quite some time. Now, even before I was using the iPhone, I was not carrying around one of those paper address books. It was something very cumbersome for me to deal with while trying to push the wheelchair around. So as people have become more and more aware of carrying things around digitally, there's been some question about how in the world do you have your contact information so that in an emergency services can get in contact with whomever your emergency contact might be. And beginning in iOS 8, there is a way to do that now. There's a thread going in the forum about that. With iOS 8, if you enter that you can enter that information into, and I'm going to look and see, remind myself what the specific application is called, because I did this earlier today. In the health application, if you open that up and you go to the very last of the tabs on your iDevice, is a section called Medical ID. And you can store that information, all kinds of medical information, allergies, medications that you're taking, contact information, emergency contact information, and all of that. And the neat thing about that is that from the lock screen, you can swipe the screen in a certain way, and it'll bring up that information. I'll have a link in the show notes about how to do that. I'll post the link is to a thread in the forum that talks about this issue a little bit. And not only does it talk about how to do it with existing software that is already on iOS 8, but it also mentions some third-party software if you don't like the way that iOS handles it. There's some other third-party applications. I believe if you have an Android phone, they have similar features. It's certainly something to consider and to think about as you go through your daily life, so that you have some way of for like an emergency services to know your contact information and who to get in touch with in the event that there is some kind of emergency. I'll have that link in the notes as usual. If I don't get the notes up tonight, although I anticipate doing so, if I don't panic. They'll be open. They'll be up sometime tomorrow evening at the latest. Okay, another one that comes to mind. Last week, I posted a tip about how to use the how to get the incremental increases, okay, in volume, okay. How to get those things. This one is, and I mentioned to you that you could take you could adjust your sound volume in quarter increments by pressing the Option and Shift key while touching one of the volume keys. Well, I want to mention, as kind of as an intro to one of tonight's tips, that's just one of the things that can be done with the Option key. The Option key, some of you may know, has a variety of uses that modify other keys, and they can be very handy. For example, if you hold the Option key down and click on, let's say you've got your Wi-Fi icon in the menu bar. Holding down the Option key while you click on that icon not only brings up a list of Wi-Fi networks, but it also brings up a variety of information such as the IP address that your Wi-Fi is using, the security protocol. So in other words, if you're using WPA2, you can see that. It'll tell you the channel, the noise level, some basic information about that. So all kinds of information about your network, some of it useful, some of it not, or to varying degrees. But here's the one that sticks with me. If you click, and once again, same thing with clicking on the battery menu, it shows you some different information. If you hold down the Option key while you click on the battery icon. But here's one that I sometimes forget about. We've had a number of people get basically hit by a browser hijack, where when they reopen Safari, they've got reopen Windows set, and when they close Safari, when they force quit Safari, there was a window that had been hijacked for one of these ransomware demands. And normally, a lot of times we've advocated cutting yourself off from the internet completely and then relaunching and taking care of it that way. But one of the things that you might be able to do and save yourself a little bit of time is to hold down the Option key while you launch Safari. And what that does is to bypass the normal opening dialog, so that the windows, the previous pages that were open, are not open now. And you can go about clearing the cache, etc., 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 so that you don't have to deal with reopening having all those windows reopened again. Thanks to member Chaz M for reminding me about this. That Option command and launching a program with the Option key held down is also useful for other programs. For example, if you launch um, iTunes with the Option key held down, you can choose a different library from the one that you normally use. Same thing with iPhoto. This can be a good way to deal with if you have very large libraries. Split those libraries into a couple of different library files, and then launch either iPhoto or iTunes, depending on which one you want to deal with, by holding down the Option key. And that lets you choose which one you will load. And that can be important, because loading a really large library, it can be slow sometimes. I know some of our users have complained in the past about some of the problems associated with managing extremely large libraries. One way to do that is to split those libraries into multiple files and load them kind of on demand by holding down the Option key while you launch the program. Another tip to keep in mind with that is the Option key. As I say, the Option key is probably one of the more powerful modifier keys that you could use. It has a number of different functions where it brings up useful information if you hold the Option key in combination with clicking on something or pressing a different key. Another one for you, just under the heading of stupid idea that I had right before the show, just so you might find this useful. I thought about this a while ago, and I tried it this evening just to see how well it would work. One of the things I find as I travel from place to place is that some hotels, some restrooms, even some of the hotels that are supposed to have handicap-friendly, disabled-friendly restroom areas and bathrooms, sometimes the mirror is up too high, and you can't get a look to see if you need to do a quick comb or anything like that. Sometimes it's hard to tell, if you're about to shave or something. Well, it dawned on me one day, and I had never done this with my previous iPhone, because it did not have the forward-facing camera. But it dawned on me that you should be able to take the camera, and I had done it once with FaceTime, just for the heck of it, to see how well it would work. But it dawned on me that you should be able to take the camera, open the camera app in iOS, and be able to see your face, to kind of look and tell, and almost use it like a mirror. It's the picture is moving if your hand is moving, but it does work. I used it right before the show to do something, just to see if I could get a good enough picture to trim something, and it does work. I know it's a ridiculous use for an iPhone, but if you got it, use it. Keeps you from having to carry a shaving mirror around, that one occurred to me, and it's one I hope I remember. You would be surprised how long I had owned an iPhone before I remembered that there is a flashlight built into it. And you can access that by swiping up on the lock screen from the lock screen, and swipe upward. And one of the things that you can activate from there is the flashlight activity. That's something that's come in handy a couple of times as we've had power outages. We usually have a number of flashlights around, but every once in a while I'm caught short without one handy, and having that flashlight in the iPhone is a good thing. If you do not have that function built into your phone, on some of the older phones, there are a couple of flashlight apps that enable this, but on the newer ones, I think, starting with 4 or 4S, it's the first ones I remember, you can get at it. It's built in the phone. I've also used that function to flash when the phone rings occasionally, if I think I'm going to miss the vibrating function. and not notice when a text or an important call comes in. All right, let's take a look at just a couple of other things, and that'll get us going. I want to mention something tonight. This is not really a tip. I won't spend a huge amount of time on this, but it's not a tip in the typical sense of the word. Periodically, we see questions on the forum where someone has a host of documents that are in an older format, and they've had to move on to a newer computer because of hardware failure or some such. And the question becomes, what do I use to migrate my older documents into the new format? Okay, as far as getting the data across onto the new machine, Migration Assistant will take care of that. But here's what it doesn't take care of. And I thought of this because of a post in the forum by someone who had a lot of AppleWorks documents that they were trying to figure out how to get into a useful format. AppleWorks has not been supported officially in a number of years. It was a great program. It had a great run. AppleWorks has not been supported in a number of years. Although you can open AppleWorks documents in some of the earlier versions of Pages. I think Pages 09 was probably the last one that you could open AppleWorks documents with. As you can see, that can sometimes be a little twitchy. You know, when the program that created a particular document is no longer supported, how do you get those documents in to something new? One thing you need to think about right now, before your current mode of operation is obsolete, consider the prospect of doing one of two things. Keeping a copy of your important documents in something that is likely to remain somewhat universal. For example, using rich text, RTF format, rich text format for word processing documents, so that when you move to a different platform or a different word processing software, it will be able to open the rich text format documents, or to periodically update. I know, for example, take Microsoft Word, for example. Microsoft Office used to contain translators for a number of older programs. And I don't think those translators are installed by default anymore because those programs haven't been used in a number of years. So you find that Microsoft Office can't read these documents natively. Now, if you don't take steps to preserve your document and get this into a modern format, then you're going to be stuck at some point with trying to figure out what program will read what document. And so it's just much easier to think now and maybe have one copy in its current format and one copy in something that's more likely to stay stable. For example, like rich text for word processing. So think about that. If you have questions about which formats might be good, you can post on the forum. Documents, for example, graphic documents, a lot of times JPEG has remained remarkably consistent. Even JPEGs written from older programs are still able to be opened. So you kind of want to think a little bit about the format being used. I just saw the, and having said that, now we'll move right into something else I was going to discuss. On the TV in the background, as we're talking here, is a commercial for the Apple Watch. And that's making a lot of news this week because on this past Monday, which was the 9th, Apple held its Spring Forward media event And one of the things to come out of the Spring Forward event was the announcement that the Apple Watch will be available beginning, I believe the date is April 24th of 2015. And it had some other information about the Apple Watch. I'm still making it through a lot of the information presented in the keynote, but it's something. There are some things about the Apple Watch that are interesting to me. I don't know for sure if I would own one. I haven't decided on that yet, but a couple of things occur to me as I haven't sat through the keynote, but I've looked at some of the other stuff. A couple things that occur to me. First of all, the price point. The lowest pricing that I have seen on the Apple Watch puts it at a price similar to other watches. There are other watches in that price point. Here's what's different, and I don't know if it's going to be a major marketing deal or a major hassle for some people. Might be for some and not for others. There's a thread going in the forum about the keynote in general and the event. And one of the comments, which is true, is that as far as pricing goes, the Apple Watch is not too far out of whack with similar status watches like your Rolex and some others. And let's take a look at that. The downside to that, as some of our users have pointed out, is that the Generation 1 edition of a lot of Apple products have had a short life before the Generation 2 comes out and there's some improvement that everybody wants. So unlike some watches that are in the same price range, there's a big wait and see kind of attitude to learn, is this going to be obsolete within 18 months to 2 years because somebody because the version 2 is better or whatever. Well, you can say that about all kinds of technology. I haven't really seriously looked at owning an Apple Watch because, to be honest with you, I have not worn a watch on a regular basis in a while. I tend to use my phone as a timekeeper, and for me, I'm always banging my wrist or banging my arm on something, and just have not worn a watch in quite a while. There are some things, though, that are kind of interesting about it. For example, I was looking at some of the promo stuff on Apple's site earlier tonight, and I noticed something. It said that one of the things that you can do is that it can add a physical dimension to alerts and notifications so that you feel a little tap with it when a message comes in. You actually feel it. Now, I know a lot of people will say, hey, you can get that by the vibrate function on your iPhone, and that's true. But for me, I noticed that there are a lot of times where, because of where I carry my iPhone, I don't always notice when the little vibrator motor kicks in. On my previous phone had a vibrator motor that would just rattle your teeth. I almost never missed it. The iPhone motor is a little more subtle than that. I do miss those occasionally. So the idea, one of the things of having a something like that would give me that little extra physical vibration might help, and it's something I was thinking about. It of course has the ability to track some health and fitness information through the Health app. We talked about that earlier in terms of emergency contact information. But the watch kind of becomes a sort of a data entry point, so to speak, for that as well, tracking things like heart rate and some of those things. There are different styles available and in a price range to match. There are about 3 different types. There is the basic stainless steel type watch. Then there is the sports series, and then also one which features an 18 karat gold cases in yellow or rose with sapphire crystals, and some interesting things about the bands. These editions, the gold edition ones, you're certainly going to pay a little bit more for. Um, I'll leave it up to you to decide which one is right for you. Not everybody's going to be a big Apple Watch fan. I don't know if I would be or not. I would have to, for me anyway, I would want to probably play around with one and see what else I will be able to do with it, just to give myself an idea. On the lower end, they're not as expensive as some watches that I've seen. You've certainly got a variety of choices for the Apple Watch. So I think a lot of it, I know for me, it's going to be kind of a wait and see thing. One of my problems with most watches is durability. As I say, as I bang things around, they get broken. So I'm a little leery right now, for me personally, until I hear what the durability is like. I certainly would be a little ticked off at myself if I got one of these and within a matter of a month or two discovered that I had bashed it or cracked it, which I have done before with other watches. So that's one reason I'm kind of sitting on that. The other thing that came out this week was some indications of one of the other things to come out was new Apple notebooks. And I had not, I had seen some rumors about that. I had decided to kind of hold out and see before I said anything about it, because you know how rumors go. Everybody thinks they know the answer, and nobody really does until it comes out. This is maybe the thinnest MacBook that's ever been created, as far as I know. It's a mere 13.1 millimeters thick. It weighs about 2 pounds, which makes it really light. And it has some other interesting design features. Still retain a full-size keyboard. You still see the trackpad, although there's been some changes. The trackpad kind of reads force information a little bit better. You don't have to press as hard on it as you have with some of the other models. The the aspect ratio is 16:10. A lot of other things have been 16:9. This is 16:10 with a top-out resolution 2304 by 1440. So you got a fairly high-resolution screen there. The Force Touch on the trackpad gives you a more uniform response no matter where you click on the surface. And you can use Force Click to enable new capabilities, like being able to quickly look up the definition of a word or previewing a file by clicking and continuing to press on the trackpad. So it's almost like clicking and holding on to the trackpad. Tactile vibration from the trackpad that adds to the sense of touch and what you see on screen. So you get a little more tactile feedback along with what you're seeing on screen. That to me might be interesting. It's heavily geared toward wireless because everything now is going wireless. They're using a new USB-C charging connector. Battery has been redesigned to give you 9 hours of battery life, and also with the way this is being done, you could not get the thicknesses, the 13 millimeter thicknesses, with traditional batteries. So what they've developed is a battery technology that's designed to make use of all of the space. It's a terraced, contoured battery design that fits inside there. I think that will be, you know, as you see that battery, it's certainly a cool looking thing. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of, if that kind of battery life, the 9-hour battery life, is able to be maintained. Some of the other technical specs that are coming along with this Mac. Pricing is starting at about $1,300. 12-inch backlit display with IPS technology. As I said, 2304 by 1440, 226 pixels per inch. In configurations of both 1.1 or 1.2 gigahertz machines. Intel Core M processors, turbo boosted up to 2.4 gigahertz. The top end model turbo boost to 2.6. You've got up to 4 megabyte of shared L3 cache. A couple of other things, 8 gigabyte of RAM. Either you're seeing 256 or 512 gigabyte PCIe based flash storage. And we're coming up with weights basically of just a tick over 2 pounds, 7.8 inches deep, about 11 inches wide, and then only about 0.14 to 0.52 inches high. Intel 5300 graphics, HD 5300. You have dual display capability as usual, video mirroring. Wi-Fi uses 802.11ac, but it's backwards compatible with other networks. Bluetooth 4. You've got USB 3.1. It's charging through the USB-C port, which is a new port. And that port's handling a lot of different things. There are adapters to go to VGA, HDMI, so all the typical, it's not gonna make a lot of your equipment obsolete. You'll just have to have the right size adapters for it. It's gotten rid of a lot of the ports with the advent of that USB-C, and it looks like that's gonna behave somewhat similar to the way Thunderbolt does, where you have one connector and various adapters to do what you need to do. 9 hours of battery life on wireless web, 10 hours of iTunes movie playback. So it's an interesting idea. The thread that I'm going to point you to in the forum has an ongoing back and forth about this machine, where it stands in relation to the horsepower available in previous machines, that kind of things. It's an interesting discussion. From just at a glance, a quick glance, this is probably not going to be the perfect machine for everybody, but it certainly has enough power for the web user, and even for some more serious tasks. I think it's going to be a little more important now than it's ever been when you start looking at these machines to decide, will this do what I need it to do? And it's going to entail, as a user, this has always been true, but I think it's more true now than it's ever been. As a user, to have some feel for how much horsepower does it take to do what I'm going to be doing on this machine. If I'm traveling with it and I'm not using memory intensive and graphic intensive applications, let's say Photoshop, for example, or if I only have a few applications open at a time, it's going to handle that without a problem. If I'm going to be doing graphic intensive work, Photoshop, InDesign, that kind of thing, then that's going to take some work. I think we're going to have to get some real world hands-on experience with this thing before we see how is a power user going to use this computer. Is it going to do what a power user needs to do? I have some reservations about it, but I might be wrong. So we'll just have to wait and see. And I encourage you, if you're thinking about buying not only a Mac laptop, but any laptop, if you're thinking about buying one, do your homework. You're going to plop down, you know, I've bought used cars before that cost less than some of the computers that are available now. So if you're going to plop down that kind of dough for a computer, take your time and do your homework, ask a lot of questions. And I'll say this, when you go into a store and talk to a salesperson, and this is true regardless to whether it's Mac, Windows, whatever the vendor, you're not an idiot, okay? You're a reasonably intelligent person. When you ask a question, that salesperson should be able to answer your question in comprehensible terms. If they can't, move on to someone who can, whether you come to our forum or you ask at another store. I've walked out of computer stores before because I asked a question that I knew the answer to, and rather than tell me that the guy didn't know the answer, he made up something. Don't put up with that. You're spending your own money. You know, ask a lot of questions. Ask the questions that you need to ask. Take your time. Go back more than once. You're going to spend a significant amount of money, hard-earned cash. Go back more than once. Ask questions. If they can't answer them, find somebody that can. That's the best advice that I can give you, not just about this machine, but about any computer that you buy. That's always been true to some extent. We get more comments on the forum from people who are not sure that they got the right machine, either because they were given incorrect information or they didn't think of the question until afterwards, both of which are possible. So I encourage you to ask a lot of questions. Talk to people, talk to friends who have computers, ask questions on the forum. We're happy to do our best to try to answer. I think we're going to know real soon here what kind of performance we're going to get out of these machines in the real world. Okay? The benchmark testing does not always translate well into real world performance, because to look at those benchmark data, you have to know, let's say, for example, I use iMovie. Let's suppose you use iMovie a lot. Are the multi-core stats good for iMovie, or the 4-core, the quad-core? Is that the one you want to look at? Is it single? You know, there's all kinds of variables that need to be looked at. Where in the real world, most people want to know the real world numbers. Those will be coming out soon. Real world behavior in real circumstances. So I encourage you, do your homework. There's some very interesting things about these machines. Certainly some very innovative changes. We'll see how good they're going to be. And that's it for now. Next week, I may have some more info about, or more comments about the keynote, as I've had a little more time to think about it and take a look at things. But I do want to encourage you to tune in next week. That's going to do it for this week's show. I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I hope that you've enjoyed listening. I know we were kind of short on tips this week. I'll have those up either later tonight or perhaps sometime tomorrow. I'm hoping that you've enjoyed the show. I've certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. I will see you next week on the Mac Forum video chat. And until then, I'm Sly Dude, and I'll see you in the forum. Good evening.